Is that the same as does your minky bit?
Yeah. So the bouton's been pushed. We're on the air.
Excellent. I'm glad. Here we are. I don't know what episode we are. I know we're in season 4 or maybe 5.
No, we're still in 4.
Oh, 4, okay.
Yeah. Hasn't gotten any better.
Number we decide it's going to be. And...
Well, let's call this episode 40, just for the hell of it.
Sure. Because that sounds like a good thing to be, 40. You know. Unless you're from Newfoundland, and then it could be 30.
30. Yes.
30, yeah.
So, my friend, it's been a very strange week since we last spoke.
Yes. And as it goes back to what we alluded in the past before, the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, has certainly seemed to have landed full force on our doorstep here in Canada. And I don't just too sure whether we just got a toe in the water or whether we're up to our waist. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, let's talk about a little technical issue that we're discovering.
Yes, and that might just point to the issues that we've been talking about in the past 4 seasons for sure, and maybe continue on into the seasons that we hope to continue with. Right.
Just to let people watching and hearing, we are discovering that certain platforms are less censoring than others. So, we look at the analytics of our weekly get-together, and we're noticing that some platforms like YouTube tend to change their algorithms so that our reach is mysteriously not there.
Limited.
Yeah, limited. Okay. And the others are much more uncensored, shall we say. We don't understand why they're doing it, other than we can only surmise that there are pressures being applied to the platform by organizations or persons or governments unknown, shall we say, because we can't prove anything. We're just two guys talking about stuff that we see. And, we have no corporate interests backing us. We don't have a team of producers or staff that does research. Just two of us watch what goes on over a week, and we get together for a half an hour, 40 minutes to talk about it, like just two people who have a number of years of experience in life, you might say. That's our pedigree. But for some reason, there are things that the AI-driven platforms don't like. But I don't think they're AI-driven to the extent that when there's a criticism leveled against certain players in the geopolitical sphere, our reach stops. So we're going to ask you to remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because that's the only way that we can get this algorithm number up where it should be. They can't challenge those hits. We knew, for example, that there were well over 100,000 views of some of our episodes, yet, in fact, there were practically no views shown on some of the sites, particularly YouTube. So, if you want to see the uncensored version of this, you go to Rumble and you listen to it on the podcasts, because they're available through Substack. So, we had to tell you this because it frustrates us. We're not, as I say, we don't have any corporate interests. We don't have any government support. None of these things. It's just two guys who see things the way they see it. You can agree, you can disagree, But
absolutely.
What we're concerned with is that there's a dark shadow of censorship and authoritarianism that seems to be creeping into our environment or in our sphere, and this is dangerous, very, very dangerous. We live supposedly in a free, market-driven society, but there are things that are happening that clearly suggest there are other forces at play here.
A little bit eerie, and again, I'm not a great history buff, but there are some parallels coming up here. We're two guys, like you said, just chit-chatting over things that we've seen. We could be having a beer at a picnic table. We could be sitting in the backyard soaking up some sun, and we're just chit-chatting about things that strike our fancy. And things were going along swimmingly until they weren't. Now, this kind of smacks about 1930-ish, when there was a group of people running around in brown shirts that were rounding up people. And nobody got too concerned about it, because they were rounding up people that happened to be 4 or 5 blocks away. And it really didn't affect them. And even when it was the next row over, well, that was always a strange neighborhood anyway. And then all of a sudden, your next-door neighbor disappears or goes away. And you start to think, I wonder what happens. But again, it doesn't really affect you. So you don't really worry about it too much until the knock comes at 3 o'clock in the morning on your door. And I don't want to sound like we're doom and gloom here. We're fantasizing or prophesizing over what will happen to the crew of BORDERPOL, all 2 of us, that maybe next week we won't be on.
Yes.
And that gives you food for thought. It gives you a lot of food for thought.
Yep. There's no question that there are things happening in the background which are impacting negatively on our ability to transparently communicate with one another, and to allow others to actually listen to or watch that communication. But we've made our point, I think, and like I said, give us the like button, hit the like button, I should say, and if you're concerned, there are other platforms you can watch this on, and let us know what you think we could do to maybe improve this, because we have no war chest here. This is just something the 2 of us do because we think it's, first of all, worthwhile. We have an interest in seeing, the integrity of our leadership maintained. And you can only maintain that if you question what they're doing. And if you're not allowed to question it, then the integrity becomes probably not possible in the sense of keeping them honest. But anyway,
yes,
so
that's right. I mean, I think we pride ourselves in being an alternative news source, I guess.
Well, we're not even news; we're just analysts.
You can disagree with us, but if you're listening to us, at least you're hearing perhaps a different side of the story. And if it makes you sit up and think, or perhaps react a little bit differently, then our day has kind of been made.
Yeah.
And at least mine has.
Well, and we like doing what we do. And so, there's no advantage to us financially or otherwise for having one observation or one opinion rather than another. So you take it for what it is. Now, let's just dive into this week's mess of stuff that came across the desk. Let's start with the Vice President of the United States, who has gotten all the elbows up crowd losing their mind right now when he tweeted, "With all due respect to my Canadian friends whose politics focus obsessively on the United States, Your stagnating living standards are as a result of your leadership. Well, this drove again, people crazy.
I understand that. But isn't there an old adage that says the truth hurts? Is he right? In some cases, I would have to say he's not only right, he's bang on. Particularly when we start talking about our immigration program, that is, you and I both know when we were in the trenches, as it were, it was a well-regarded, well sought after program. Like, how did you guys do that? Why are you doing this? What's this? We can't do this and that. How do you? Everybody was always asking questions about it. Now I think it gets back to again some of those when you were supervising and you wanted to write something about an individual, and I always go back to the two famous ones that were on the internet at the time, both dealing with the British military. And the one was, people follow this man, not because he's a great leader, but because they want to see where he ends up. And the second one was, this man would be out of his depth in a parking lot puddle. And I think that's where we ended up now. We've got people following us around to see what inane, stupid things we can do, because they know darn well that the current bunch of people leading this country would have to find a puddle to be lower than. I mean, we've got a leader who has spent more time in 7 months outside of the country, coming up with imaginary deals, than he spent in the country, and we have yet to see the fruition or the kickback, take, whatever it is, on any of these pieces of paper that he's signed.
Oh, there's kickbacks, but not to the Canadian people.
Oh, yeah, and let's be clear. Yeah, we're not talking about criminal kickbacks here. We're talking about as a country. What have we garnered from all these memorandums of understanding or pledges on pieces of paper that this individual has struck, and again, the latest one being with the United Arab Emirates. We had to give them what did
he's saying that there's going to be $2 trillion, $2 trillion of Canada pension plan money to be invested in the UAE. Now, how does that happen without having some sort? First of all, the Canada Pension Plan is not the property of the government of Canada. It has no authority to do anything with the Canada Pension Plan, to best of my knowledge, anyway.
Well, and mine is limited. I'll admit that right up front. I don't know all the ins and outs of the workings of the financial world. But coupled with that, anybody here in Canada, whether you trust Google or what your favorite platform is, just type in what are the elements of theft under the Criminal Code of Canada, and tell me how this individual could take $2 trillion of something that is not his, is not the government's responsibility, and promise it to another country or to another group of countries without falling under the definition of theft.
Well, you might want to remind our viewers what those 4 points are, because I think it's salient to the conversation.
I don't have them right offhand here. Let me just see if I can find them again. Okay. But the
because it's
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The accused took or converted property. The property belongs to someone else. The taking was without consent, and it was done with the intent to deprive the owner of it. Now, it's quite obvious if he's going to give $2 trillion of money in the Canada Pension Plan that he's taken it.
Correct.
The property belongs to the pension board, not to the government.
Correct.
The taking was without consent because, as far as I know, this has never been raised in the House of Commons, nor has it ever gone to probably to the board of the pension people.
Correct.
And it was done with the intent to deprive the owner of it. Well, nobody talked to me at all about whether I want any money of mine from the Canada Pension Plan to go anywhere other than into making the plan work.
So then one has to raise the ugly part. What's the motivation here?
Well, we've thrown out that gauntlet before to say how, I can't really say the S word on without probably getting us throttled, but how inane can people be? And we have to stop asking that question because it's becoming a challenge. We think that we've hit rock bottom, and somebody has managed to actually dig a hole further down the rock bottom than we thought. I don't know where it's going to end.
Well, here is a bit of advice to any Canadian that actually gives a damn. Question this idea of taking $2 trillion out of Canada, out of the Canada Pension Plan. Write to your MP. Talk to your neighbors and friends. And if you're one of the elbows out retired crowd, think about how that will impact your pension. Because if that goes broke because they pissed it away in some quango through the UAE, then you deserve what you get.
Gone.
That money's gone.
Yeah.
So
it's just like getting the well, maybe not quite, but the Nigerian prince.
Yeah. Maybe the Nigerian prince is who. Maybe there's some relationship between the Nigerian prince and the people who think this is a good idea. But let's
maybe.
Okay, but let's put that as item number 1 on today's think about this list. Second, well, that'd be number 2. Sorry, number 1 was the J.D. Vance suggesting that the Canadian leadership is responsible for the mess we're in with regard to immigration, border security, and refugee affairs. Okay, so that was number 1. This is number 2. Here's number 3. I suggest to people that the Liberal Party of Canada should actually be called the European Union Party of Canada, because this guy, Mark Carney, is looking more and more like someone who wants to become part of the EU. There's just so many things he and his cohorts are doing right now. We laughed at the Eurovision Song Contest. Got to be a member of that. Then we laughed at the $500 million they've given to the European Space Agency. Out of nowhere, we laughed at that. Now, he's decided, while he's in South Africa prancing around at the G20, that Canada will not support the Trump, American, Putin, Russian peace initiative, all 28 points. He's going to side with the European Union that's against this because they have a vested interest in their industrial military complex to keep war going with Russia. Let's be clear here. Canada's joined the EU through its foreign policy alignment on Ukraine. Coincidentally, this is the same country that's discovered over $100 million has escaped through various organized crime channels out of the Ukraine. It's probably double that amount of money. And coincidentally, the Carney envoy, the special envoy to Ukraine, Miss Krista Freeland, is leaving to join the Rhodes Trust in the UK on July 1st. So maybe the stink of that corruption is starting to fill her nostrils too. Sorry, go ahead.
And apparently she still has not resigned her seat as a parliamentarian.
Well, that's because we are in Canada. You can be in 2 or 3 different places at once. Come on.
I forgot.
So this guy claims to basically look after Canada's interests because Canada has no relationship anymore with the U.S., but apparently we're having a love affair with the European Union, and especially the leadership that is unelected, authoritarian as hell, and wants to attack Russia. And so the Canadian sovereignty has now been sold to Brussels. and the warmongers there. Now, Bob, were you consulted about this change in our foreign policy when it comes to who we're going to be tying our wagon to?
No, that's very true. But there's a lot of things. Out of fairness to the government, there's a lot of things that they don't come to me and ask my opinion of. So I guess this is just not one of those things. But you know the old adage of a picture being worth 1,000 words? You sent something pre-production of our illustrious Prime Minister sitting at a table.
Yes.
Espousing on something, obviously. And you would not know that he is a representative of Canada because there is absolutely nothing that shows that he is Canadian, and he happens to be sitting behind a European Union flag.
At the G20.
Now, if you don't happen to know much about what the G20 is or who's there or who's not, most people would try and find something that identifies that individual with which country they belong to. Now, out of fairness, perhaps Mr. Carney has a small maple leaf tucked away on his lapel somewhere, because I do see something on his coat there that it might just be a speck from...
He always wears his Order of Canada badge, yeah.
Well, there we go, yeah. And you can only get that if you're Canadian, I guess. But I don't know. There's nothing there that shows that he is Canadian, that he's speaking on behalf of Canadians, that would lead... What was the old terminology we used to have when we were working on the front lines? What would a normally cautious and prudent person be led to believe? Well, a normally cautious and prudent person would look at this particular picture and go, I wonder what country from the European Union he's been selected to represent.
Well,
because there's nothing there that suggests that he's Canadian.
Well, he is.
Other than perhaps his Order of Canada.
Well, he has an Irish passport, and Ireland is part of the European Union. He has a UK passport, which is also an ex-member of the European Union, but he was a big proponent while he was the Bank of England head to keep the UK in the European Union. So, you know, all those signs are there. Just connect some dots here. But for this humble observer, the United States is not going to overlook this sellout to the European Union on the issue of Ukraine. Okay? And there's going to be a high price to pay for Canada if the powers that be in Washington get their noses out of joint because this little guy from Canada wants to put a stick into the gears or the spokes of the wheels that the American administration dearly wants to solve, and that is this war between Russia and Ukraine. There's something very wrong here, folks. So, you know, when over and over again officially sanctioned anti-Americanism comes out of the PMO's office, blatantly saying that our relationship with the United States is over, and then this guy, this Irishman, this Brit, who also happens to be a Canadian, goes down to South Africa at the G20 and aligns himself with the European Union warmongers, the two women from the EU, van der Leyen and Kallas from Estonia, who are absolute warmongers. Sorry, there's something very wrong here. And by the way, there was never any discussion in Canadian Parliament about how we're getting more and more aligned with the EU. It's clear where we're dancing around with Swedish industrialists to buy a warplane, a fighter plane from Sweden, which is technically in all levels is inferior to the one we've already invested millions of dollars in. But now just to poke a stick in the eye of the Americans and scuttle a deal that will make the whole relationship with them at the technical level problematic. How are you going to have this piece of junk in comparison to the aircraft that they've been working on and invested millions into in NORAD. Compatible with our, forget NATO. Like, what is it? What is wrong with these things? What is wrong with the military in this country that are sitting around their duffs, letting the carnage that this is impacting on the whole military complex in Canada? The other BS that came out of this crowd, item number 5, I guess, this week, is that they made many billions of dollars worth of deals with Germany to produce naval equipment for Germany. Then someone said, well, the billions really aren't billions, because if you look at it over the period of the deal, the so-called deal, another Neville Chamberlain piece of paper that he goes around waving with the deals he's making, turns out to be $40 million a year. Okay, well, that's chump change in any military deal. I mean, that's a tip that you give to one of the corporations for working with you. That's not a deal. Okay, so this is just looking over the shoulders of these guys and saying, what is wrong with the Canadians who are seeing this and just going along to get along? I'm sorry, I guess we're just two old guys going, there's something not right here. It stinks. Okay, Bob, you read the four elements of a criminal case. There's something seriously criminal going on here. No one's asking the right questions. Follow the money. And again, what's the motivation? I want to know what the motivation is, because so far I can't figure out why hitching our wagon to the EU is a good idea. Geopolitically, it makes zero sense.
Yeah. You know what? You had mentioned something pre-production about the way we were going to get kicked out of NORAD. Well, I truly don't know why we are in NORAD. We don't have a Navy really to speak of that would be able to go and help out in a big time of crisis. We have an aged fleet of aircraft, which is going to continue to age because we can't make our mind up whether we're going to side with the Americans or side with this. And then by the time we make a decision, well, that'll be 10 years down the road, and we'll find out it was the wrong decision. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. So another 10 years. Our Army, apparently, there's less armed forces personnel than we have Revenue Canada personnel. So that kind of puts it all in place. So I could see us getting punted from NORAD or from NATO very easily because we wouldn't be able to help out anything. The big concern I have is NORAD. If the United States says, oh yeah, go ahead, buy those Griffin things, but it won't be able to read the IFF that we've got for all the NORAD stuff. So if you happen to get shot down, it's not our fault. I don't understand. Yeah, okay, maybe on a very, very high esoteric level, we're close to the European Union because we're only a short little hop, skip, and a jump to Greenland. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. No, we're a lot closer. We're a lot closer to the United States. There's not even, down where you are, there's a huge, vast body of water that separates parts of the United States from Canada. Probably larger than the strait that separates us from Greenland. But that's a small part when you sit back and think about it.
Look, it's the question that I see raised over and over again on social media is why is the Canadian government so hell-bent on destroying our relationship with the United States? What is this motivation? Like, what in the hell motivates the Carney-Trudeau regime? Because they've been at it for 10 years. This is not new. Okay, we are now in the end game here. When you take on the United States over a major geopolitical issue. That is the war in Ukraine with Russia, which is a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy to put an end to, which has now seen one event after the next prove that this whole thing has been concocted, that there is lots of money being made by some folks, and that the entire cabal involved from the European Union has been essentially unmasked as being nothing more than a dream, a wet dream of this is the EU is going to have regime change in Moscow, and they're salivating over the natural resources that they could scoop up if they took over Russia. This is crazy talk, okay? And so
it worked very well in the Second World War.
Yeah, the guy with the mustache didn't do it.
Well, and as you said, too, it didn't work very well for the French and the guy by the name of Napoleon. It didn't work very well.
Yeah, well, it goes back 800 years when the Prussians thought they'd do this nonsense.
So let's go back and say, like we did at the beginning of the show here, trying to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's insanity.
Well, it's I don't understand. I just don't understand the motivation. I can't get my head around it. Part of the thing is that I think Canadian politics over the last 10 years has been driven by emotion and not reality. I mean, it really is very strange that, generally speaking, we had a fairly consistent, logically thinking leadership. Whether you agreed with it or not, I mean, I don't think the Liberals before the idiot king ran the show were as screwy as this bunch is. I mean, you can't say that Paul Martin was a nut job. You can't say that Jean Chrétien, for all his flaws, was a far left wingnut. But this crowd here is got a couple of sort of genes in their political makeup that is seriously weird, and they've managed to convince at least 30% of the population from various polls that people take that they're on the right track, and the rest of the 70% sits around with their fingers up their posterior and go, But I don't understand the motivation of trying to take 100 years of a relationship with a superpower next door, blow that up into smithereens, and then go wandering off to China and then pissing off the Taiwanese who tell you, excuse me, but if you make a deal with China, there's not going to be much of a deal you're going to have with us, say the Taiwanese to the Canadians, or wandering off to the European Union, which doesn't know in many cases if it's punched, bored, or drilled, right? And we're going to sell our sovereignty to those guys, but heaven forbid should someone question our relationship with the U.S., I mean, the madness of this is what gets me going here. Like I said, why is the Canadian government so hell-bent on destroying the relationship with the United States? Someone explain this to me. Because at this point...
I don't think you can. I don't think anybody could.
I don't get it.
It goes down, and I guess to me, the analogy that would best describe that is when we had Trudeau Jr. take over the country in 2015, we went into a post-nation state. Hence, we had all our immigration programs thrown wide open. Anybody could come here. We're not a. We got to get rid of this past where we had all these people come in and colonize this territory. And you were looked down upon if you had any kind of patriotism. And I mean, again, sorry to rag on about this, but viewers that have been listening for a while know that I had this pent up hate for our passport. which went from showing wonderful things about how this country developed to a plethora of snowflakes and stick people wandering around on ponds, to if you actually had the audacity to raise a flag, you were a redneck, ultra conservative, to a point now where apparently it's okay to show your patriotism and show flag. Even if you're living in Timbuktu, you can get your picture of your flag on a local media station here, because now it's okay to wave the flag. So this is politics. I don't think they got anybody's interest except their own in staying in power and lining their own pockets and doing what's good for them, not what's for the good of the country.
Well, look, the country is broken on many levels, and sadly, I don't know if it's fixable anymore. I'm at the point now where I just don't know. How do you fix something that hasn't got proponents in the corner to fix it? Okay, all we have is people who want to make it something no one understands. The post-national state that idiot previous prime minister dreamt up, and people drank the Kool-Aid. Oh, Canada's not a country; it's real estate where a lot of people live. Okay, well that's fine. Then what's the point? If that's how you see it, don't give me this logo with the maple leaf in the middle of on the flag, and that's your corporate logo. Because if it's just real estate, there's lots of other logos. McDonald's has a logo. Amazon has a logo. Walmart has a logo. By the way, they're all American logos. CN used to be Canadian, but it's not really anymore. CP used to be Canadian, but now it's joined with Kansas City. These are just kind of random thoughts I'm throwing out here. But, the point is that there's so much that's not Canadian. We have 13 different jurisdictions who still can't get along. We had all this malarkey earlier this year, or when Carney was elected, and the premiers and the territory people got together, the so-called Team Canada. Well, that didn't amount to much, because the interprovincial barriers are still there. You still have individual provinces legitimately that have their own trade associations, their own business association. They protect their own interest. Every community, if we didn't have that, there'd be no cities. There'd just be a big glob of people living in some sort of, centrally planned and run business. The reason we have different levels of government is because there's also different levels of private enterprise and different levels of education and different levels of corporate structures. You just don't suddenly slap your knee and say, now they're all going to be the same. It's never going to be the same. Everything is local. Everything we do is local.
Yeah.
So don't try to tell me that I'm going to have to, figure out what you're doing out in BC with the Indian claims or the First Nations claims on your property, because I don't know what you're talking about at 3,000 miles away here. Yet we have people who are talking Team Canada. We're all going to, be the same. Nothing's going to happen on it. Nothing has happened on it. Okay, and we're really rambling here, but there's just so much stuff that makes no sense here anymore. We have an immigration system that's in crisis, and no one gives a shit. Sorry to say that. All we do is
it's true. I mean, we've had representatives from the border agencies before parliamentary committees who is saying we're so short-staffed that we tell people there's a computer over there to enter the details and we'll follow up later on. I mean, what kind of an idiotic country does that?
An idiotic country. Most Canadians aren't anti-immigration. Most Canadians aren't anti-refugee.
No.
We just got to the point where we've had enough with the chaos. We're just anti-chaos, but the chaos is what's being created by these geniuses who are, as I say, too busy trying to figure out how they can screw up the United States. I mean, this really seems to be the core of their being. Is everything is and it It was 4 years of Trump not being in office, and they still kept doing it. So it's not like from the time 10 years ago when this bunch of lunatics were elected, and they've been elected 4 times. Let's not, they might have a minority government 3 times in a row, but they're still running the show. And you've got 70% of the sheep that are going along with this nonsense. Okay? And when everybody knows that we've lost control of our borders, we've lost control of the immigration system, we've lost control of our criminal system, we've lost control of our identity because nobody can tell you what a Canadian is anymore. We've jettisoned any traditions that we've had in order to appease this globalist melange, and now all of a sudden we're quite happy to sell our, not we, this bunch that's running the show is happy to sell our souls to these fools in Brussels, okay, and thinking that the people that we've been most closely aligned with for the last 100 years to the south of us are just going to sit around and let this Western Hemisphere suddenly be run by a Brussels-based entity. This isn't going to happen. And you want to know about NORAD? They'll blow up NORAD. There'll be no free trade agreement. None of this stuff. You're dealing with fire here, okay? And this is self-inflicted wounds. We're going to bleed to death as a country on this one.
Well, absolutely. Because even if we do become very, very aligned with the European Union or the British Commonwealth, what's left of it, these people also realize that their bread is buttered with our big neighbor. And if they can get a trade with the United States, which has at least 10 times the population of us, that's where they're going to sign their trade pacts. They're not going to be taking on us to get what? Like, what would we be able to sell them? What would we be able to do that would benefit a big trade with Britain or with any of the European nations? So if we want to align ourselves with that particular crowd, we would be well reminded of what happened to Caesar. And that classic line, "Et tu, Brute?" I can just see the knives coming out. If we have no tie to the United States, that we would be trod over in a moment by these so-called friends in the European Union, who, as you've mentioned before, are nothing more than a bunch of bureaucrats that are appointed to represent their country.
Look,
they're not even elected.
No. Look, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, who we talked about in pre-production, we won't even bring up. That guy's as culpable, if not more. This joker, whose name is Marc-Andre Blanchard, from Quebec, of course, was the country's former ambassador to the UN who oversaw Canada signing this migration pact with the UN. He's got this dream of 100 million people should come to Canada. That's going to make us, really powerful nation. This is this whole, absurd globalist view of the Carney government. They flood the zone with as many millions of people that have nothing in common. Nothing whatsoever of interest to Canadians. The host community be damned. This Irishman, this Brit who's masquerading as our prime minister, I'm sorry, is hell bent on just basically turning this place into something that's totally chaotic, ungovernable. And then what's the motivation for that? Are you going to then suddenly become the big authoritarian and fix it all? Because other places have that. You wreck the joint and then you come around as the savior, the messiah. You're going to fix it. Problem with this is timing can be critical. Okay, and so can emotional attachment to what's left of this place, not the logical attachment, which will be a problem. And this guy is playing fast and loose without considering what we just spoke about earlier. If you want to piss off a superpower next to you by turning this place into a Venezuela, you are really, really playing with fire. Look, All the Americans have to do is say this country is not safe anymore, right on their border. They can put us into the same league as Mexico with the cartels that run most of the Mexican government. Everybody knows the Mexican government is as corrupt as hell. We've been laboring on a misapprehension here that because we're Canada and we had all these laws and rule of law, all the talking points, but the corruption's still there. It's very clear because no one is being asked in a democratic way. What do you think of joining the EU? What do you think of cozying up to China? What do you think of pissing off the U.S. and just wait till the Americans suddenly determine, you know what? I think Canadians need a visa to come to the U.S. And when Trump, in his petulance, because he can be petulant, said, we don't need your lumber, we don't need your oil, we don't need your steel, we don't need your aluminum, etc., we don't need your cheese. He may have been talking in exaggerated ways, but truth be known, he's probably right.
Well, absolutely, yeah. The old adage of the truth hurts, it keeps coming back, we think that we're special, and to a certain extent, perhaps we were. Not special in the sense of being gifted or anything, but we had a great relationship with the United States for 100+ years. That seems to have been the last 5 in particular gone downhill.
Absolutely exploded. Dynamited. Yeah. Yep.
So why would we want to do that? I have no idea.
No, the motivation is unclear because why would you wreck something that was working? This is the point.
Yeah. And I guess that was, we talked about it before. I mean, if you are happy as a Canadian citizen, whatever that means, to not go to the United States because they might ask you a question that you don't feel comfortable answering, or that the fact that they have the audacity to take pictures of you entering the country and leaving the country, when you have absolutely no problem with that happening when you're going into the European Union or into the United Kingdom. You can't, again, you can't have it both ways here. And if the United States decides that you're right, we are now like Venezuela, we are like Haiti, we are like Mexico, we're going to put a wall up. And I can hear the elbows up crowd and all the anti-American, good, put it up. We don't want you to come here either. Until you absolutely, what happens then when you get sick and the only person that can help you is the doctor in Philadelphia and you can't get a visa? Or, you want to go and visit with your grandkids and you can't get there because you can't get a visa, or once again, I'm stunned at the lack of global thinking that's going on in this country right now. We used to think that a great many countries around the world were xenophobic, and I think that we've doubled or tripled down on that. If we were going to Timmy's, I'd say we'd have a double-double on that one, but I just don't understand what this whole thing is. Is it like in university where you have those courses where you find out who the bullies are, and work on that, and then you trade places and find out that the bullies are really not bullies, they're going to be bullied twice as hard. Most of what we're doing right now just does not seem to me, and I've never been called this before as a cautious and prudent person, but to me, whatever's going on right now is not going to end well. We're going to be like Dorothy when the tornado touches down and she realizes she's not in Kansas anymore. We're reaching that point, not just in Canada, but on the world stage, that we will have nowhere to go. And we might actually need a visa to enter the United Kingdom. We might need a visa to enter into the European Union. We just don't look beyond the end of our nose on a lot of this stuff. And that's my rant for today.
Well, we may be wrong on all this. Time will tell. But I have seen other. The part of the problem is that we're old enough to have seen this play out in other parts of the world, and it didn't end well. Mm-hmm. This is particularly difficult for us as Canadians because we thought we were smarter than that, and I think we turned out to be not so smart. Despite our own self-importance on this in the scheme of things. I think the golden age of Canada passed us by probably 20 years ago. When we were a middle power that was respected, more or less. We had a functioning economy. We knew our place in the world in terms of what we could do. We punched above our weight sometimes when we had to, and I think we can say those with pride when it came to things like in Afghanistan, for example, militarily, or during the first days of the various wars where we said no, we're not going to participate in them because that's not our place. Whether it's the Iraq War or what have you, we said things in the UN that people actually believed and listened to and voted for. Nobody gives a rat's behind what we say anymore in those forums because, first of all, we've angered our allies, and then we've cozied up to whatever emotional string can be pulled that makes the news for a 72-hour period of time, but it's also weak, and you can blame it on woke, you can all that stuff. We lost it. Okay, we decided that we're going to water this place down. We're going to be all things to all people, which you cannot be. That just doesn't work, and so we became, I think, hostages to our own self-importance, or we started to believe our own lies for whatever reason. I don't know how that happened or why that happened, but we lost something along the way, and the bunch that's running the show now have 100% capitalized on that. So in a normal set of circumstances, when you have a case, let's take the Krista Freeland case. This is a woman who's an MP for Rosedale. Doesn't even live here now. She's in Kiev, working.
Soon to go to
exactly. And does anybody question what the hell kind of MP is this? She should have resigned. She should have resigned when she went off to Kiev. No, we needed that. She votes on her phone during the budget from Kiev. I mean, what are we doing here? What the hell are we doing? If you had said this 20 years ago, someone said, you're making this up. Okay, that's just not possible. But it's possible. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think when you have a chief of staff that totally ignores ethics issues for his boss, who runs interference for Brookfield on behalf of his boss, it's evident at various hearings. You're going, well, what are we talking about? And we fell into this JV culture. We became the junior varsity team, and we function in the little leagues now of Paul. At least in the old days, 20-some years ago, we forayed into the big leagues, but we knew what position to play when we were playing in the big leagues. Now, we've just decided to become like high school student councils, because if you look at the news, compared to the rest of the world, which has much bigger fish to fry than we do, we've become mediocre. Okay, and
that would be a very, very over exaggeration. I think mediocre is probably where we're striving to be. One other point you brought up, and it kind of hit me. What we used to be. And was it a good thing, or was that where we hit the apex? And I go back to the terrible events of 9/11.
Yes.
And no airplanes would land in the United States. And any of the planes that were around the United States were diverted to Canadian airports.
Yes.
And a great many of those places, in Newfoundland in particular, where people were welcomed into their homes. And they didn't question anything. What would this cabal do now with their anti-American sentiment? What would happen? Would they let the planes land? And two, would they put them behind barbed wires and tell them they couldn't leave and they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that? I'd like to think that we would rise above that kind of inaneness. I don't even know if that's a word, but my goodness, folks, that's what Canada used to be, a nation of people that lent a hand, that did things, not because they wanted recognition, but because it was the right thing to do.
Correct.
And somehow along the line in the last 10 years, that has just eroded, gone.
Yeah, and 10 years ago, someone who was in their teens are now in their mid-20s. And that's what their whole life is colored with. Well, think about that. The Gen Z, for example, is totally confused as to what's the point of being in Canada, because they've got no foundation of the things that we just talked about. They don't know what you're talking about, So when you have 20% of the population has no affinity whatsoever to this community, and has been basically tossed in here over the last 3-4 years, you are really fighting an uphill battle to find commonality of purpose, of commonality of a future of the community, because there are no foundational ties. Okay, so
no, none at all. I guess maybe just to kind of wrap this all up and where we have gone in this particular entity called Canada. Your generation, my generation, even down to probably my youngest brother's generation, would be able to tell you where they were on November 22nd, 1963.
True.
And the horrific events that reshaped the Americans in particular, and the rest of the world in general, because of that particular event. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You want to know what it is, folks? Use the internet and find it. But here we are today. What, 20 years? Oh God, 45 years later, 40 years later. And it's not even mentioned in the news.
That's right.
It's gone. It's finished.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Today is the 22nd of November. You're right. I forgot as well. Good point.
And it's I guess it's outlived its 72-hour news cycle. I don't know. It's unfortunate. It's a shame. And maybe that's where we as a culture, not just Canadians, we as a humanity in Earth have this ability to morph into something else and be totally forgetful of what transpired. Anyway, be that as it may, there's been an awful lot that's happened in Canada this week, and for our viewers that are perhaps in Europe and in the United States, I can go back to it. We were on a vacation just earlier this year, and we were running into Americans who were saying, please don't hate us. Well, I'm going to have to turn around and say to our American friends, don't hate us. This is not who we are. This is a cabal that is doing things on their own, and I won't even say that the current leader that we have here is doing it on his own. I'm sure that there are people behind him, but
yeah,
food for thought.
Yep. Well, it is. Okay. Well, now we've had an hour of jawboning, so we better let people get on with their lives.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Have we solved the world problems? I don't think so.
No, we haven't. That's not our job. Because we don't have jobs.
I know. Well, we do. We do, actually. For you, it's getting very, very close to that magic time called happy hour.
You betcha. You betcha. All right. Well, for very interesting that today's November 22nd, anniversary of JFK. I know you're right. It's just forgotten. Well, we won't forget it. We'll close on that. Remember the day.
Yeah. Remember the day. And if you're too young to know what we're talking about, do some research.
Absolutely. All right, brother. I shall see you next time.
And on.
And on.
And on. Yes.